Talking about the presenter, Partha Mishra. He's an experienced data scientist who's associated with organizations and providing solutions on automating tasks and reducing the turnaround time. So, hope you guys will have a great time with him. Thank you for staying with me. And now I will ask Mr. Partha to take over from here. Over to you, Partha.
Thank you, Nancy. Let me present my screen. Yeah, is my screen visible?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So talking about linear regression, the first thing that comes to the mind is the linear relationship between variables. If we think about it, in our childhood in mathematics, we must have seen this equation y is equal to mx plus c. So this is a simple linear equation between y and x, where y is our target variable, or also known as the independent variable, and x is the dependent variable. That is, using the values of x, we're trying to predict what would be the value of the y. So if I have to give you a very simple example, let's say if we say the equation is y is equal to 2x. So depending on the value of x, let's say if I substitute the value of x as 1, automatically the value of y will be predicted as 2. Okay, so this simple fundamental is being used in linear regression while we are trying to implement this on a larger data set. We must have used linear regression technique using only two, or let's say three, equations. But what if we have more than 3 or 4 variables, but we want to predict some value out of it? So in our today's example, we have the uh, data collected for the houses, and what we are interested in is to find out what would be the price of the house. So when we talk about the variables associated, there could be many variables. So top of the mind immediately, if you think about it, you might consider the area of the house, or maybe the number of rooms in the house, the amenities provided. So these are some of the variables that come immediately to the mind. So using these variables, we're trying to predict what would be the price of the house. Okay. So internally, what the machine learning algorithm does is it is going to calculate the price of the house using a model, and then we would have the actual values of the prices. So whenever we are actually building a machine learning algorithm, we take the entire data and we split the data into two components. One is called as the training set, and the second half is called as a testing set. In these two sets, the first half, the training set, as the name implies, is being used for the model building. So when we give this particular data to the model, the machine will interpret what would be the relationship between the variables, and by analyzing that particular data set, we will be able to uh, like the model will be able to understand what exactly is the relationship. So let's say if I give it the data, and by analyzing the data set, the model comes up with something like price is equal to 5,000 times the area of the house plus 3,000 times the number of rooms. Let's say if we just take this example. So this particular equation is created using this training set. Now, how do we check that our model is good enough? That is, whatever model the system has come up with, is it actually predicting the price properly or not? To understand that, we require the test set. Now, the test set has the exact same informations. Okay. So if we, let's say if the entire data set had about 1,000 rows, okay, and let's say I'm going to split the data into 70-30. That is 70% of the data, that is 700 rows, will go into the training set. The 300 rows which are left, I'm keeping that aside for the testing. So now this particular equation has been developed using the 700 rows. Now to check how good the model is, I will be using this 300 rows and checking what would be the predicted value of the price. That is, now we have an equation. So in this equation, we will feed in the value of X. So after this, the model is going to give us a predicted value of the price. Now what we can do is the price which is given by the model, that is allocated as Y hat. Okay, so this is the notation which is generally used, that whenever we have a predicted value, it is denoted with the symbol hat. So Y here will be the actual price and Y hat is the predicted price. Okay, so if you see in this graph right now, in this graph we have about 5 data points, 5 to 6. So out of this we have only one data point which is matching on this particular line. Now we know linear regression is nothing but a linear relationship between two variables, two or more variables. So the model, whatever it's going to build, it's going to give us a straight line equation. So if you're plotting the data out, so here the axes, the x-axis and the y-axis, the name as it is, we can give it. So x is nothing but our attributes and y is our target variable. All right. So now what we have to do is, from the test data, whenever we are getting the y hat values, we are going to compare how close is the predicted value to the actual value. So in our case, this particular equation that has come up, only one data point is exactly matching. But there are a couple of points which are very close to the line. That means the error term. Now, whenever we are talking about the error, it means the difference between the predicted value and the actual value. So if you have to put it in an equation, it is nothing but error is equal to y hat minus y. All right. So here, this particular thing, least sum of squares, this indicates that we are trying to figure out what is the least error that can come up in this particular model that we have built. So our end goal is to analyze the data and come up with such an equation which can give us the most accurate value of the house. So the easiest way to know the price of the house is if we buy the house. But we can't buy every single house, right? So if we are trying to figure out what the price is, the next best alternative that we have is, if we pass the data into a model, it is going to predict some particular price of the data. So price of the house, whatever is predicted, we are going to compare that with the actual price. And wherever we see the error is minimum, we would consider that model as a good model. So in this particular example, in the figure, out of these data points, there's only one house where the price, actual price, is very low compared with the predicted price. So here you could say there's this particular gap. If I simply draw a straight line, this gap is huge. So there, what we would say is the error term is going to be high. So if somebody is actually wanting to buy the house and he or she is going to rely on this particular model, they would get a very big number compared with the actual price of the house. So that is one of the drawbacks of linear regression. That is, we are only looking at the linear relationship. So the error term, if it is very high, we could simply reject the model, saying that the model is not able to predict the prices properly. Okay. So now let's get into the coding part of it. Okay, so for the coding piece, the first thing that we require is the libraries. So we have about 6 libraries that we need for performing our linear regression in Python. So they are NumPy, Pandas, Matplotlib, and for visualization, we will be seeing Seaborn and Plotly. And for the model itself, we will take the help of scikit-learn. Okay. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to import this particular libraries. So let's start coding. Some of the libraries like Pandas, NumPy, they have aliases which are pretty common in our uh, data science fraternity. So let's say whenever you see any code online, or if you are looking at some of the codes which are being given by your seniors, if you look at this term as PD, automatically you should understand that the library pandas has been used. Similarly, NP is also one of the most popular aliases. So whenever you're looking at some code and you look and suddenly you come across this term np dot and some particular function, that means NumPy has been used. Similarly, for Matplotlib, a section of the Matplotlib called pyplot, that is more commonly uh, aliased as PLT. So here we have to import as, I'm going to do tab auto completion, all right. So that way we will be able to complete our tasks faster. Seaborn has been imported as SNS. And now if we really want to look at the graphs inside the Jupyter Notebook, we need to use this function called matplotlib inline. It's also called as a magic function. So one of this magic function called inline is pretty popular whenever we are doing coding inside the Jupyter Notebook, because the plots, it's better to look at the plots inside the Jupyter Notebook rather than sudden pop-ups coming up. Okay, so for Plotly, we will be looking at the graph objects. So we have about 4 or 5 imports that we need to do. Import Plotly. From Plotly offline, we require 2 components. So this should have been from. So from Plotly offline, because we're in a Jupyter Notebook, we require net underscore notebook mode. And the next thing we require is iplot. The most important component that you can think of in Plotly is the graph objects. Most of the code that you might find online, you would see that graph objects has been used. This is one of the most popular components of Plotly. The next component that we'll be using is subplots. Subplots allow us to create multiple plots in one go. We will see one of these examples in our code where we will be actually fitting in 4 or 5 charts inside one chart. So you could say it is kind of a big poster wherein based on those particular calls that we have given, we will be defining the entire chart into, let's say, 5 parts, and each part will be assigned to one of the plots. From this, we require the make subplots. Okay. Data visualization has been taken care of. Then the next thing we require is a scikit-learn. So from scikit-learn, we require 2 components. One, like I mentioned, we need to split the data into test and train. So for that, we require from model selection, we need train test split. So this will help us to split the data into the training test and the testing data. And the next thing that we require is linear regression itself. So sklearn dot, we have different families of models inside sklearn. So we will be requiring linear regression from the linear model family. So all the imports are complete. Now we can actually start working on the data. So I'll be defining the data in short as DF. So that way we won't have to type much. So here we'll be writing as PD, that is from pandas. We'll be taking it read underscore CSV. Read underscore CSV is one of the most popular ways of importing data because most of the data that you would find will be in CSV files. So our file name is Melbourne Housing underscore full.csv. Here I've tab auto completed this thing, but that's the only code that we need right now. So pd dot read underscore CSV, we need to just pass in the file name. Okay, now that the file is imported, let's just understand what kind of rows and how many number of columns are present in this. So using df.shape, this particular attribute will let us know how many number of rows and how many number of columns we have in this data set. So without even looking at the data completely, you will at least have an idea of what kind of data you're going to tackle. So we have about 35,000 rows and 21 columns. The next thing that we need is, obviously, we need to understand what the exact data is. So we'll be taking the help of the head method. So dot head method is going to make sure that you will be able to see the first 5 rows in the data frame by default. Okay, so if I run this, you can see it is showing 5 rows cross 21 columns. That is the first 5 entries in the data frame have been given as the output. Okay, but when we scroll through, we are able to see this dot 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 notation. Okay, this is happening because we have 21 columns, and Python by default, most of the packages that are written, they want to optimize the memory usage. So here, because there are 21 columns, not all the columns are shown to us. So you could see probably the first 5 or 6 and the last 5 or 6 columns. But what if we want to see the entire thing? So I don't want it to think about trying to save memory and not show me those columns. I really want to look at all the 21 columns. For this, what we need to do is we have to change the options. So here we can do pd dot set underscore option. This particular method will allow us to change the setting. So in this, I will just mention as max column. From max column, we have to mention how many rows and how many columns we actually want to see. But by default, if you simply mention none, it is going to show us all the particular columns. Because there are 21 columns here, I want to look at all of them. I'll simply mention none and I will run this. Now, if you run the same command again, so df.head, this time you'll be able to see all the 21 columns. So if you scroll through, you won't find the dot dot, but you will see all of those columns. Okay. So from this, we can understand there are many columns which are numeric and a few columns which are categorical in nature. So if you want to figure out how many exactly are numeric and how many are categorical, by default, that means while reading in the data, Python has assigned, looking at the data, Python itself will assign the column as a numeric column or a categorical column. That is categorical in the sense it will be treated as a string. So if we run this particular method called .info on the data frame, here you'll be able to see all the 21 columns. In Python, everything starts with the digit 0. So 21. So for 21, it starts from 0 all the way till 20. Now here, if you just look at the D types, D type stands for data types. In this data types, you will be able to understand integer and float columns are total 13, but the rest of the 8 columns are in object. By object, most of them would be in categorical data. Okay, it has been read as an object because they are in string format. So the next step, what we will do is, now that we have an idea about this particular data set, we need to change this object to categories. Okay. So for example, if we say that there's this column called suburb. Okay. So we know there will be different suburbs in that particular, in this data, whatever area has been selected, those will be few in number. So suburbs can actually be considered as a category instead of simply keeping it as a string. Okay. So what we will do now is we can first print out, let's say, only the names of those columns where the data is of this particular object format. Okay. For that, what I'll do is take the help of select D types. This method, you're going to pass in what kind of data type you're searching for. So we require the object data type columns. So I'll just pass in object as a list. And then I'll mention it as dot columns. Okay. So if you run this, now this particular object 8, which was mentioned in info, these are the names of those columns which are of object type. We actually got a list of this particular columns. Now the next important thing that we have to do is we have to change this particular columns into categories. Because if we just pass in a string to a machine learning algorithm, it will not do any kind of analysis on that. So the next best alternative that we have is we have to convert it into a categorical data. So for that, I will just mention in this particular thing, I'll just mention a new variable called, let's call it object categories. Okay. And in this, let's just pass in this list of objects that we have. Okay. So now the list is ready. We have to convert this entire thing into categories. So we can simply take a for loop and convert the entire thing into categories. We can do it using the following method. So call name is something that I'm putting for the time being. It is a variable that is used in the for loop. Okay, so for call name in, we have this particular variable that we created called category objects. So I want to convert all of them. So I'll simply mention df call name is equal to df call name dot. Now, because we have to convert object into categories, we can take the help of as type. And here we have to simply mention what we want. So we want this entire thing to become categories. So as type category will accomplish the task for us. Okay. Now that is done. If we take a closer look at this particular data, we have this date column which was mentioned as object. Okay. And we know Python has something called as a date time variable in itself. So now we have taken actually the entire thing and we have converted into categories. But date, we already have a date time structure for that. And pandas has a particular method with itself that we can take the help of and convert that particular column into its right type. I'll simply mention df date is equal to pd dot to underscore date time. And here we'll just mention the column again. So we want this date column to become a datetime object. So pd dot to underscore datetime will complete this. Depending on the size of the data, it would take some time to process. Since we only have 35,000 rows, this has completed pretty quickly. But if you take any of those larger data sets wherein you have, let's say, 1.5, 2 lakh rows, this could take a couple of more seconds. Okay, now let's look at the info again and see whether all of these tasks that we have done so far has been properly executed. Okay, now in dtypes we are able to clearly see categories are 18 number and float is 12. Okay, so here the datetime object has not converted. So we need to, let's just run it once again and see if it is done properly or not. Okay, it is not changing. Then the next option that we can do is remove this date from here. Okay. And let's run the kernel once again. So I'll simply mention restart and run all so that we don't have to repeat the entire thing in a manual process. Okay, now that we have done it, now when we are looking at df.info, you can see clearly the date has been converted into datetime 64. Previously, it was converted into category and pandas was not able to convert into datetime object. The solution we brought for that is we remove that particular date column from the objects dot underscore category, this particular list that we created for the categorical variables. All right, so now the data is in the right format, so we can move forward. Okay, now for the numeric data, we know that we have about 13 columns which are in numeric format. By numeric, I intend to say about the floats and the integers. That is what I'm calling as a numeric variables. So to get an idea of exactly what the data has for these numeric columns, we will take the help of the describe method. Okay. Describe method only works on the numerical data, so we'll get an idea of what exactly the numerical data has. And to make things even more simpler, I'm going to perform the transpose on this so that we will get the column names as rows and its particular attributes in the columns itself. By that, I mean this thing. When we run this, because of transpose, what has happened is this column names should have been in over here. But transpose, what it does, it shifts. So the column names have become the row names. So that is why you're able to see rooms, price, and the other columns as rows in here because of the transpose function. Okay, so when we look at this data, there is some of the columns which are actually showing us a bit of a confusing information. By confusing, I mean to say you could see the land size has a minimum value of 0. Okay, same thing goes with the building area as 0, meaning that if we consider as the building area as 0, there is no house for that particular entry, which is a bit absurd. Okay, so if we look a little closely into this data set as to what they have done for the land, this particular variable called land size, we have actually one condition wherein while constructing the house, if the area of the house is constructed in such a way that the walls of the house is actually overlapping with the exact boundary condition. So that is called as a zero lot house. Okay, so that is the reason line size has been given as a minimum value of 0. Okay, but this building area of 0, this has become an outlier. We need to get rid of this particular entries because building area can never be 0. Similarly, if you look at the year built, okay, so there is one entry wherein the year is 2106. Okay, that means the house was built in the year 2106, which has not even come. We are in the year 2020. That means there has been some kind of typo for the person who has actually collected the data has made a mistake. Okay. The another thing which we can see is this particular variable called postcode, that stands for the postal code. So the postal code, we should have actually considered it as a categorical variable rather than a numeric variable, because we know postal codes are assigned for different, let's say different states or different parts of the country. So we should convert this postal code into a categorical variable. So we'll perform the same task again. So let's say I'll just mention it as numcats. And here I'll just pass in postcode. This we need to change. So like before, we can simply mention for call name in numcats. Df call name dot as type. We require this thing to become a categorical variable. So we'll simply mention as category. Let's run this. Okay. Now, if we take a look at the head of the data again. Okay, so here there is this column called rooms. Okay, the entries, if you look at the first five, we have twos and threes. Okay, but if you take a closer look, we have this rooms and we have this bedrooms. Both of us are giving us the same kind of information. So you could say the data has been duplicated, or what would have happened is the person who has taken in the data has written this, probably the bedrooms and the rooms is giving us the same number of information. Okay, so we need to check that. Do these two columns have exact the same kind of information? If yes, then we need to delete one of them. So to figure that out, the easiest method to do is, let's take a subtraction between these two particular columns. So I'm going to subtract rooms data from the bedrooms data, and let's see if you're getting zeros in there. If so, then we need to get rid of one of those columns. So I'll be creating a new variable called rooms versus bedrooms. And here, let's first mention rooms, and we'll be subtracting bedroom. Okay. Now let's take the entire data frame and take a look at that particular column. So whenever you're creating a new column, that gets added in as a last column in the data set. So if you simply scroll and you check the last column, you will find this new variable that we have created, rooms versus bedrooms. Okay, and we could see almost all of the entries are 0. Okay, that means there is no new information if we keep rooms and bedrooms together. So we can actually drop one of these columns. So let's drop the bedroom column. Okay, so for that, what I'll do is, let's take the help of the drop method. So in the drop method, we will be mentioning the columns which we want to drop. So here we require we'll be dropping this bedrooms column, and now that we have compared these two particular columns, we don't need this new data that we have created. So rooms versus bedrooms also can be dropped. Okay. And here, after mentioning the column names, we have to assign, I mean, specifically tell Python where exactly it has to search. So by default, it will search those two variables, bedroom and room versus bedroom, in the rows. But if we mention as comma 1, that is access is equal to 1, it's going to search for those names in the column where it will find those because these are column names. So when we run this, now this data doesn't have bedroom and room versus bedroom. Okay. And if we look further into this particular data set, nowhere are we finding the age of the house. Okay. We might have this information called year built. So it is only going to tell us when the building was built, but it's not telling us the age of the house. So now we actually will take the help of a little feature engineering and figure out exactly the new variables. Okay, so for that, the first thing that I'll do is, let's find out what is the maximum value of the year built. For that, I'll simply mention year built of max. Okay, so previously, like we saw, the maximum year was coming as 2106, which is quite understandable that it is some kind of typo that has happened with the person who has collected the data. So we have to like check what are the other values. That means we are going to see what are the other years which were built, because maximum year itself is showing us some absurd number. We have to see what are the other numbers. So for that, we can simply mention df year build dot. The first thing that we can do is we can drop the duplicates. Okay. So once the duplicates are dropped, then what we can do is simply reset the index. And after the reset is done, we can sort those values. So sort values. But here we require this. In sort values, you have to mention exactly by what you want to sort. So we want to sort this data using the year built column. I'll mention by year built. And since we want to know what is the maximum value, here we'll be mentioning as ascending is equal to false. Okay. So we will be getting the entire data as a descending order from maximum till the minimum value. And we are not interested in all of the values. Let's just look at the top 5. Okay, so I'll simply mention dot head and let's run this. Okay, drop duplicates. Okay. Once we do that, we are able to see these are the top 5 years. We know 2106 is one or some kind of typo, so we are going to ignore this. The next highest value that we have is 2019. Okay, so what we are going to do now is, since we don't have any other information to cross check, we are going to change this particular value of 2106 to 2019. Okay, that is one of the assumptions we are going to make. So for doing that, we are going to take the help of the replace function. So df of, we need to change the year built. So dot replace, and we want to replace to 106.0 to 2019.0. And we don't have to again do the override, so I'll simply mention as in place is equal to true, so that we don't have to assign it back to some other variable and complete the task. Now that this is done, let's just check this particular command again. So I'll simply copy paste this particular thing. Let's check if everything has been done successfully or not. Okay, so now everything is in right order. So the highest year built value is 2019, and that is what was expected. Okay, now what we need is, we wanted some variable which should give us the age of the building rather than the year built. So since we don't have any column called age, let's create one. Okay, so df of age is equal to df year built, and we can simply mention max. So that means we are going to take the maximum value, that is 2019, subtract df year built. Okay, so this will give us the age of the building with respect to the year 2019. Okay, so let's perform this. The next thing what we can create is, let's say if the age of this particular building is more than 50 years, that is with respect to 2019, if the building is more than 50 years old, then let us call that as uh, either historic, or we can call it as contemporary. Okay, for that we will be taking the help of NumPy. So let's call a new column called historic, and here we will be having historic. So here we'll be saying np.where. np.where will allow us to check a particular condition, and the condition what we want to check is the age of the house. Okay, so df age, we were saying that it should be either greater than or equal to 50. Then we'll call it historic, else we will call it contemporary. Okay, that is done. This particular historic column, let's convert it into a category. Now we know it would have been converted as an object because it would be a bunch of strings. Since it is only one column, we can simply mention df historic is equal to df historic dot as type of category. Okay. So I've converted that into a categorical variable. Now let's look at the final data set that we have. df.head will give us a quick view of that particular data. So the last column that we have created is historic. Okay. So for example, here we have a house which is 119 years old compared to 2019. So that has been called as historic because it is matching this condition that it is greater than 50. Otherwise, it is called as contemporary because if it is NaN, the way NaN could have come, NaN is nothing but not a number. It would have come wherein either the age information is not present. So here you can clearly see the year built information was not present. Even the year built information is NaN. So it means it's blank. So it cannot create a new, like it cannot give any value. And this particular condition will fail. So it's not greater than 50. So it will be given the label as contemporary. Okay. Now this data set is ready. All we have to do is check now the missing data. Now, since we have seen some of the columns are having NaN value, we need to understand how much of the data is missing. Okay. So for that, we can simply say df dot is null. And I'll simply call on the sum function. So it will give me the total sum of the null values inside the data. Okay, so for example, we have the price column which has about 7,600 null values, or let's say distance which has only one entry which is a null value. Okay, sometimes what people would prefer doing is instead of looking at this entire data and checking how many are there, it would be more clear if we simply got a percentage number. Okay, so instead of saying like year belt has 19,306 entries which are null, if I can actually get a percentage number, it would be way more useful. So for that, we simply require, after the is null call, we can simply mention as sum divided by we can take the total length of this particular data frame. Okay, so dot sum divided by the length will give us a percentage. But this entire thing will be in a fraction. So if we require to see exactly in terms of 100 percentages, we'll multiply it with 100. So instead of the fraction, we'll get a percentage number. Okay, so this is much better. So we can clearly see that price is only is having about 21% of the data which is not present. And there are a few columns where the almost more than 50% of the data is not present. Like for example, building area is 60% of the data is not present. Similarly, year built about 55% is not present. So these are huge numbers. Okay, so the other way you can check this thing is we can do a small visualization using Seaborn to check the percentage of the missing values. So let's say you don't want to show this kind of tabular format to the client, okay, that this kind of data is missing. You could simply do a heat map visualization. So for that, let's create the visualization. I'm creating two variables, fig and axis, and I'll be taking the help of subplots. Okay, so even matplotlib has something called as subplots. We'll be using that. And here let's declare the figure size as, let's say, 15 by 7. And in Seaborn, let's set the size. That means the font size, let's create the font size to be 1 point times the regular value. So font scale is equal to 1.2. Okay. And the main component that we'll be using are heat maps. So SNS dot heat map. And in the heat map, we have to simply pass in this exact same thing. So df dot is null. Okay. But we are not going to pass in the percentage part. We'll simply pass in the is null component. And here we'll simply mention we don't need the ticker labels for the y-axis. So y-tick labels we'll mention is as false. And we have something called as the color bar, which comes near the Seaborn map. So since we are only interested in the null value percentage as a form of graph, we can simply mention the C bar also as false. Okay. And so let's put the color map as, let's say, gray in the reverse format. Now, last thing that we can mention is plt.show. This will allow us to show the plot. Okay. Okay, this kind of error comes in where when you have made a wrong entry in the CMap, all right. So it is saying gray underscore R is not valid. So let's change it to, yeah, instead of gray, it should have been grays. Okay, so now we got our, this particular heat map is shown. Now, just by looking at this heat map itself, we can clearly say that we have about 9 columns where the data are missing. And we can clearly mention that these 3 columns, the building area, year built, and age, these are the 3 columns where maximum data is missing. Okay, so either looking at this particular heat map, you could say that directly, or you could go through this percentage numbers and you can come to the same conclusion. So now that we know that so much data is missing, to make our task easier, let's simply drop those columns where we have the null values. Okay, so we can mention this as, to keep things very simple, let's drop all the rows which are having null values. So df is equal to df dot drop na. Okay. So the drop na will make sure that it's going to drop in all the particular rows which are having null values. Okay, now let's see how much data are we left with after dropping the null values. Simple info call will give us the information that we're looking for. So there are roughly about 9,000 entries left where the data is complete. That is, there is no null value. Okay. Now that we have it, we have to make sure that we don't have any kind of outliers present in this data. And because we have taken care of the categorical variables, the only variable that is left is to check the numerical data. There, do we have any particular columns which is having uh, huge outliers which can actually spoil the model? Okay, so it could be like if we have an extraordinarily old building. Okay, so if it is maybe more than 500 years old, then it is going to spoil the particular model by giving it a very high error value. Okay, so to check that, we can take the help of the describe.transpose methods. Okay. Okay. So here, if we simply look at, let's say, age, like what I mentioned, if the house was extremely old, let's first check that particular age value. Okay, so here if you see the max value, we are able to clearly see that there is a house which is 823 years old, extraordinarily old house. Okay, so let's find out how many such houses are present. So for that, we can take the help of a simple filtering. So here we can mention as df of the age column is having a value which is greater than 800. So I'll simply mention age greater than 800. Okay, so there's one such house in 5 Armstrong Street, which is about 823 years old. Okay, if you look at it, it only has it's a house type. Okay, and only has 3 rooms, but it is 823 years old. This value has to be removed from the data because it's an outlier. Okay, the next thing which we previously saw was the building area. The building area, if we look at it, building area, we saw there were some entries which are having zero value. Okay, there are a lot of entries which are having actually zero value. So we have to remove this particular entries. Okay, so for that, let's simply mention this. So if we want all the houses where the building area is not zero. Okay, so what we can do is we can simply override the data frame. So df of building area, and here we can say not equal to 0. It is going to give us all the entries where the building area is not 0. So this piece df building area not equal to 0 is a filtering part we are doing, and after data is filtered we are going to reassign it as a data frame. Okay, so that is for the building area. Similarly, we can do the same thing for, okay, land area we were not supposed to do. We are going to keep the land area as it is. All right. So building area, we have removed those entries. Now, let's look at the price column itself. So price is our target variable. Let's perform some of the visualizations and see for ourselves like what exactly is the distribution pattern in this graph. SNS.dispplot going to give us a distribution plot, and in that we are going to mention as price. Okay, this should have been in quotes. So DF price, and we don't need the kernel density estimator graph inside it. We only need the distribution plot. So KD is equal to false is what I'll be declaring. All right, and to make the graph a little more clear, we are going to color the edge of the histograms as black. So for that, we can simply mention hist underscore KWS is equal to, we'll pass in a dictionary. In this dictionary, we'll mention as edge color is equal to, for black, we have this color coded as K. Right, so if you need the black color, we can simply mention edge color is equal to K. It was going to give us the black color that we want. And for after this, we can simply mention plt.show. All right. So if we look at the price, we can see majority of our prices are in this particular range of around 1 million. Okay, so around 800 or 900,000. These two particular peaks that we have corresponds to the mid value of between 0 and 2 million. Okay. And the next thing that we can easily make out is this data is normally distributed, but there is a right skewness to this data. So it is skewed towards the right hand side. It's not exactly normally distributed around the center value, but it is skewed towards the right. Okay. All right. So just to save on a little time, I've already written this part of the code. So here what we have mentioned is this particular region name. If you look at the data, we have the region names as completely expanded. So let's say, for example, Northern Metropolitan, Southern Metropolitan, and all of these names are huge. So when we're plotting something with this particular values, the particular name is going to overlap. So to make our lives a little more easier and the plots a little more clear, I'm going to rename these particular values as some kind of short form. Like for example, Northern Metropolitan has been written as N Metro for short. Similarly, the other values. All right. So once we run this, it is already rename has already happened. Okay. The next part, what we'll do is the subplot that I was talking about earlier. So in the subplot, let's first run the subplot, then we'll understand what exactly we have done. Okay. Region name price. Okay, this region name column is not existent in this data set. That is the reason it is not uh, giving us any value. It is giving a NaN value over here. That's the reason we have this error in the end. So if I simply mention as this particular piece of code, comment it out, and if we run this, we'll be getting our graph without an error. Okay. So here what we have done is, first thing that we have is, previously you would have seen whenever we're plotting this graph, we are looking for a dark grid. Okay, so that would make our lives easier when we're trying to study exactly what kind of value, approximately what would be the value. Okay, so it is going to give us a grid structure in this side. The next thing that we have is, for the figure we have the subplots. So when we are mentioning subplots 2 by 2, what we are telling Python to do is, we require a plot size and you want to divide the plot into 4 parts. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Next thing is, now each section has to be plotted separately. So when we are saying 0, 0, you can clearly see it is plot between type and price. So if you look at this particular graph, type and price is in the first quadrant. Okay, so this is a 0, 0. Similarly, you can see the names of the other. So 0, 1 is method and price, and here we have method and price. Similarly, the other two. So each of them we are going to declare, we are creating box plots, and in this we have declared x and y variables, and the data we have passed in as df. Okay, and axis we are clearly mentioning what axis we need to plot this graph. So axis we have to clearly mention as, let's say for example, if we wanted type versus price, we are clearly mentioning axis is equal of 0, 0. Method and price, we are mentioning axis of 0 and 1. Okay. Similarly, when we're talking about this particular value of, okay, when we're going to plot something using our Plotly, okay, I'm going to plot the histograms. But before doing that, what we have done is, we are filtering on the data of the price column. So first variable that we have created is all regions, and all regions is having the price of the entire data. Okay, and let's say we are only interested in the northern metropolitan area. So here what we will do is, using the lock method, we are going to first filter out the north metro values, and we are going to assign these values into the northern metropolitan. Okay, if you understand this particular code, here we are simply mentioning go.histogram. Go, as you remember, it is the Plotly graph objects. Okay, from Plotly graph objects, we are asking for a histogram, and here in the x-axis we are mentioning as whatever. Suppose this, out of this variable, suppose I want the entire price data, so I'll go for the all regions variable. So x will be plotted as all regions, and then we have the here we are mentioning as hist norm is nothing but what kind of plot are you looking for in the histogram. So we want the density plots. So in hist norm we are going to mention as density, and you can name the plot as all regions. Here in the marker variable, you can actually assign what kind of color you want. Okay, and if you go to the Plotly documentation, every color is coded into a different value. So color codes are different for different colors, and that is one flexibility that Plotly has given you. So let's say for example, out of 10 colors you are interested in plotting the graph, but only using those 5 colors which you want. So instead of going by the default value, let's say if we talk about Seaborn, in Seaborn, it's not asking you what color. Simply, it's taking in whatever data we have passed in, and it is assigning the color by itself. Okay, it has never asked us what kind of color we want. But Plotly will ask you that it has given you an option. Even if you don't, let's say, if you don't put in the marker, then by default it is going to take some kind of color. But this flexibility is there in Plotly. Okay. All right. Now for the main thing. In the linear regression, we saw we have so many different columns. Now the main question that comes up is, out of this 21, or let's say 2021, if we remove the price, we have 20 columns. So out of this 20 columns, which column do I exactly take for building the model? Because it's a linear regression, we have to consider the correlation. So for this, we can simply do a heat map of the correlations. So heat map of correlation, you simply mention df dot corr. Okay. And let's say I want this particular correlation plot to have a line width of, let's say, 1. And because we want to see the numbers, we have to give the annotation as true. Okay, let's run this. Okay, this is bad. We need to make sure that it is clear. So we need to make a little adjustment in here. What we can do is, apart from the line width, let's go for the annotation sizes. In this, we have to pass in a dictionary. So in this dictionary, I'll mention as size is to, we need, let's say, we'll take in a size of 9. Okay, this is much better. Okay. In this, what we have to look for is, if you look at this particular C bar, which we actually removed while we were plotting out the missing values data. All right. This C bar is actually giving us a pretty good indication as to what we are looking for. Okay. So because of linear regression, we require variables which are having high correlation with price. Okay, so out of this entire correlation matrix that we have right now, we should be interested in looking at this price column. Okay, so in this case, it's the price row. So wherever we have the very high values of the price, we are going to choose those particular columns. Initially, if we look at it, we don't find any value which is extraordinarily significant. So there are few columns which are having close to about 50-51%, but rest of them are very low. So 20-30%, or probably 0.05. It's almost close to 0. Okay, so out of these particular columns, if we have to actually build a model, then let's take particular thing as, let's say, 30%. Let's go for age, because it is weakly positive correlated. And if you go for moderately positive, let's go for rooms, bathrooms, and building area. Okay, so we can take these values because these particular values are close to 50%. And let's build the model. So here, what we have to do is, when we're building the model, the first thing we need to do is we have to define the variables. So let's say we have, by definition, always the attributes are defined as X and the target variable is defined as small y. So here, if we have to take in those particular columns, so we have rooms. That's the first column we wanted. Second column that we required was bathroom. Third one is the building area. The fourth one was age. Okay, so this is our attributes. The target variable that we wanted to find out was the price of this particular building. The price becomes our target variable. Y is equal to df of price. Okay, some of you might be wondering as to why we have taken here double bracket. Okay, by taking a double bracket, we are ensuring that the X column will remain as a data frame. So sometimes what happens if you go for single brackets, the data might be read as a, instead of a particular data frame, it will be read as some kind of series object. But we don't need series objects, we require a data frame. That's the reason we have double brackets here. Okay, now that this is defined, X and Y is defined, now we need to break the data into test and train. So for this, there's a small shortcut that I would like to share with. So if we go for test train split that we want, that we have actually imported. Okay, here if you simply mention shift tab, all right, it will give you the documentation. So if you expand the documentation, inside you have this particular example. Okay, here in this example, you can simply copy this particular line. All right, so you don't, it is going to save you some time. You don't have to code in so much. You can simply copy paste this particular example line, and there we can change the percentage if we want to. Okay, so let's say instead of 33% test size, let's break it at only 30. So 70-30 split, we are going to fix to that. Okay, and let's keep the random state as instead of 42, I'm going to stick to 0. Okay, so let's understand what this particular line is doing. We have 4 variables: X train, X test, Y train, Y test. So training data will have the 2 components, attributes and the target variable. So X train and Y train. Similarly, testing data will also have the same kind of set, X test and Y test. Okay, so test train split is going to ensure that it is going to give this 4 particular values in this particular order: X train, X test, Y train, Y test. That's the reason we have written it in this order. Okay, and it is going to assign these particular values. So 70-30 split is going to happen. So once this is done, our data is ready for training and testing. Okay, all that is left to do is we have to create the model. So linear regression model building, the first thing that you have to do is you have to create the object for the linear regression first. So by object, I mean, let's say if I'm calling the linear regression as LR, okay, and we have imported linear regression in the beginning, okay, and we have to call linear regression. So we're going to mention it as a method here. So LR is equal to linear regression brackets. So it is nothing but LR is the object of a linear regression model. Okay, so we have created the object. The next important step that we have to do is, now we require the equation. So for getting the equation, we need to give the model the training data. Okay, so here what we'll mention is LR dot fit, and inside the fit method, we will mention the X train and Y train. Now, after this is run, we can be sure that the model has the data inside it. Okay, it has already processed the data. Now the next important step is you have to do the predictions. Okay, so by predictions, if you remember, when I was showing you the slides, we were talking about something called as y hat, the predicted values. So those values we are going to get from this model now. So let's see how we can do it. So I'm calling the prediction values as y underscore pred. Okay, for simplicity reasons. And here, all you have to do is lr dot predict. Okay, so lr dot predict, and inside this, the only thing that you have to pass is x test. Because if you remember, we have to pass in the x variables into the equation, and using the values of x, it is going to predict the y value from the equation that it has built from the training data. Okay, so now if we run this, we would have the predicted values with us. Now the most important step that you do after the ypred variable is defined is you have to check how much better is the model. Okay, that means when you're giving this equation y is equal to mx plus c, how well is the x variable able to define the y variable? So in our case, in the x variable, we had these variables: rooms, bathroom, building area, and age. So what on the question we are asking is this particular model. So how well are the rooms, bathroom, building area, and the age data able to predict the price? Okay, to check that, we require something called as the r squared variable. Okay, so for that, we need to do a small import that we should have done in the beginning. So import sklearn.metrics. Okay, and we could simply say from sklearn.metrics. Since we need only one, we will simply import the right explained variance score. Okay, this explained variance score will tell us how well our chosen variables have the potential to predict the price value. Okay, so now the way we can check it is we can simply say print, and we could say explain score. Inside we are going to pass in y test. Remember, y test is the actual price of the house in the test data. Okay, and ypred is what we are getting from the model. So we're going to compare these two values now. And once we check this, we're getting a score of about 41.77%. Okay, compared to what we have seen in the correlation, we saw a correlation majority of the variables were close to 50%. Okay, and just by taking these particular 4 variables, we are able to get about 40% of the price variable explanation. That is to say, using this particular 4 variables, you can actually predict 40% of the price. Okay, because if we look at it in a more realistic manner, the price of the house is dependent on many other factors. It could be like, for example, one thing you could say is, let's say the price of the house in some particular locality. Okay, so if you go for the outskirts of the city, let's say, there you would see the price of the same kind of house, a building which is having the same area, same number of bathrooms, same number of rooms and all, it would be cheaper compared to the same kind of building if it is built inside the city, or let's say if it is inside the center part of the city. So that building will be a little more costly. So using these particular four variables, we are able to predict 41.77% of our price component, which I think is pretty good comparing this particular value 41% to the maximum value which we had here, that is 51% from the correlation plot. Okay. Now, the next important thing that you have to check is you have to check the residuals. By residuals, I mean y prediction minus y test. Okay. So for that, the first thing that you have to do is you have to calculate that particular value. Or if we have to do it in a more simplistic manner, we can take a distribution plot. So sns.dist plot. And inside this, I'll just pass in y test minus y pred. Remember, y test minus y pred was our error term. Okay. So here we're trying to figure out what is the distribution of the error, or you could say what is the distribution of the residual. This error term is also called as the residual. Okay. If we run this, we are able to see this kind of plot. If you like observe keenly, we will see that the mean value of this particular distribution is hovering around 0. Okay, and this particular distribution is not exactly normally distributed, but it is somewhat close to a normal distribution. So we can say that the model which we have built is actually pretty good. Okay. Now coming to the main thing, that is, the main question is what exactly is the equation that the system has come up with. Okay, for that we can create this particular information into another separate data frame. So for creating data frame, we can simply mention pd dot data frame, and inside I'll just mention the parameter data is equal to, we'll take the coefficients of the linear regression model. So lr.coef underscore is going to store the information of the coefficients from the linear regression model. The next thing that we have is the index. Because we're creating a data frame, let's keep the index as the column names. That is our attributes. Only the columns which we have chosen for creating this particular model, we have taken that. Okay. And now since it's going to come in the form of a data frame, let's call the column name itself of the data frame as coefficient. I'll just call it as coef. Okay. And let's print it out. Otherwise, we'll simply run this thing. Okay. Yeah, this should have been columns. Right. So this is the equation. So if somebody asks you what would be the equation, you could simply say price is equal to, it's about 36,000 times the room, 2,76,000 times the bathroom, around 3,100 times the building area, plus 7,000 times the age of the building. This is the equation that the model has come up with. Okay, so that is how the model has built this equation. Now, if we have to try to infer exactly what the model is saying, so you could simply say, if we have 1 unit change in the number of rooms, keeping everything else constant, the price will increase by 36,463. Okay. Similarly, if let's say if the number of unit, if it has suppose let's go for bathroom. So if the bathroom number has gone up by 1, keeping every other factor constant. So we are changing only one variable at the same time, just to see how it's going to impact the price. Okay. Here in this equation, all the variables are going to impact depending on the coefficient. And here, one more thing that you can observe is none of the coefficients is negative. Okay. Because we have only chosen those variables where the coefficients were positive. Okay. So if we had gone for something like, let's say if we had gone for this 31% negative price, okay, this was corresponding to the year built. Okay. So year built, if we had taken it, would have been a negative coefficient. That would mean that if the year would have gone down by 1, gone up by 1, the price would have gone down by that particular coefficient, which is pretty logical. The older the house, the lesser the value. Okay. This is what I had to share with you today. Do we have any questions? Hello.
Yes, some models using coefficient and variance, right? Can you explain what is exactly coefficient and variance?
Coefficient and variance. A variance, you're referring to this particular explained variance score.
Okay.
Yeah, explained variance score is what exactly is that the value which is being predicted. Okay, that we're comparing with the actual value. Simply put, what we are saying is, if we have built a model using 4-5 variables, so how far these 4-5 variables are actually able to predict this particular target variable. So in our case, the price. So here, if I have to put it simply, all I'm asking is, I have chosen rooms, bathroom, building area, and age. Okay, these 4 variables I've chosen. So using only these 4 variables, how well are these 4 variables able to get the information of price? To what extent? So this particular information has been given from the explained variance score, which is coming out to be 41%, which is pretty good comparing this value to the correlation matrix that we have built. Okay, so this was about the explained variance score. Coming to the coefficient part, now when we are building a model, so if I have to make it very simple, initially I had mentioned that y is equal to mx plus c. Okay, the simple linear equation, if we remember the straight line equation, we have m as the slope, c as the constant. Okay, now the slope is going to tell you how much is x able to change y. So when I give this example as y is equal to 2x, that means if I change the value of x by even 1 unit, I'm going to get a change of 2 units in y, because the equation is y is equal to 2x. So here when the model is built, these 4 variables which we have selected, rooms, bathroom, building area, and age, these are having these particular coefficients. Okay, so if we change the value of room by 1 unit, all these 4 variables are predicting the price component. Price is our target variable. Okay, so if out of this 4, let's say I'm only changing the value of rooms by 1 unit. So rooms, previously if it was 5, let's say I'm choosing the value as 6. So there's a change of 1 unit. Delta x is 1 in this case. So by changing the room size by 1, the price is going to increase by 36,463. Is this clear?
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Yep. Do we have any other questions?
Guys, do we have any other questions? You can even ping it on the chat box. If you have any.
Okay, then I'm assuming that there are no further questions.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks, Partha. Thanks for the session. So thank you guys for joining us. I've just posted a Facebook link, a YouTube link, and the feedback form that you have to fill pertaining to this session that you've attended. So please do fill the same and send it back to us. We will come back to you shortly on the upcoming webinars link for registration. So see you there. So anything else, if you have anything else, please write back to us. Okay. Hope we can wind up the session now.